So every time that you have a political debate with someone, the chances are that whenever something major happens in the news, they tell you that it's just one thing. They say, oh, it's just one story, mate, so it's no big deal. However, these people are insane because they're forgetting that it's happening every single day. So when they say that it's just one thing, they're really starting to add up. So what we're going to have a look at today is an average month in the UK, and we're going to see just how much these so-called one things add up. Because we started the month off with a very bizarre headline. Essentially, Sadiq Khan was too scared to do in-person events in London, and he made a massive part of his calendar video call only. Which makes no sense, because he's always trying to tell you that London is safe, and he wants you to follow those rules. Yet he doesn't feel safe when he's surrounded by armed security in a well-protected office down the road from the Metropolitan Police Station. Not to mention the whole place is covered in CCTV cameras. So if Sadiq doesn't feel safe there, then how does he expect you to feel safe? And then the very next day we saw how a council in the UK has given away over £3 million. It's been paid to ex-staff, and it's not redundancy. They essentially call them golden goodbyes, but it really just seems like cash out the back door. And something quite a few of you said in the comments below. A lot of people said that these guys will take the payout and then they'll return a couple of weeks later as advisors. So they essentially take £3.3 million to leave, and then they come back a few weeks later with a new role. And I guess the council allow it because it's not exactly their money. And then things started to get even weirder. Because in this particular one thing, we saw how migrants are not allowed security tags. You know, the ankle monitors or the ankle bracelets. It's something that British criminals wear all the time. But when it comes to random people from random places, apparently they're above the law. And what's crazy about this is the reason why they're not allowed to wear them is because the Information Commissioner's Office said that it was a breach of their data protection. Like, these are the guys that are meant to have thrown their passport in places like the English Channel. So they just happily let their details launch into the English Channel, but the police aren't allowed to track their whereabouts. And make no mistake, the police would put you on tag. This really is a good example of special treatment, so feel free to screenshot that one. And then the very next day we saw one of the strangest items ever placed on security watch. Because the Co-op have started selling £1.45 herbal health drinks. It's got things like ginger and turmeric in it and things like that. And it probably tastes absolutely awful. But apparently it doesn't stop people stealing it. Because the Co-op have essentially put it in a suitcase-sized security box. Essentially meaning that you have to ask permission if you wanted to buy this. You just got to take the whole thing to the till. I mean, it's got to take up like a quarter of your basket. And it's £1.45 as well. It's not exactly an expensive item. But I guess as things get worse, it'll just happen more and more. And then we saw what I thought was one of the strangest stories so far. We saw how Bedford Council has updated its website to show over 106 different languages. It's got everything on there from Javanese to Sudanese, making it easier than ever before for people to not learn English. Because this is Bedford Council, they're located in England, but apparently the English language don't matter to them. And the worst is yet to come. But like I said, don't ever let anyone tell you that it's just one thing. Because when it happens every single day, it just grows and grows. The people that tell you that are either stupid, or they're just simply lying to you trying to skew your mind. And that really is why you gotta listen to everyone and every opinion. You gotta come to your own conclusions. And because things continue to just go downhill, the very next day we saw how shoplifting incidents are happening at a rate of 600 every single hour. That's 600 shoplifting cases an hour. Like, that really is out of control. Because that's 600 businesses, and that's 600 people affected. But you know it'll be zero criminals caught, because this is Clown World. And the mad thing about this, right, is if you compared these numbers to when you were a kid, I bet the present day is way ahead. Like, even 50 times or 100 times worse. Honestly, I would not be surprised. And as if crimes couldn't get any worse, it turns out that the police in Scotland, right, are not going to investigate so-called minor crimes. And some of these include things like damage and antisocial behaviour, something that I don't think society should call minor. Because these criminals commit a crime and they essentially get let off. From their point of view, I guess it's a win-win. And then the very next day we saw 27 homes being given away free of charge. But the twist? Well, these homes are reserved for random people from random places. And it's happening all over the UK. In fact, schemes like this have cost us hundreds of millions of pounds. And what I find ironic about all of this is that these people have paid £0 in taxes. They have not contributed, but they are receiving cash back. And then in another line of so-called one things, we also saw how Sadiq Khan had been keeping major secrets. Because after having to repair hundreds of ULEZ cameras, he actually refuses to say how much it's all cost. He's essentially spending your money, but he's not telling you where it's going. Like, I know I'm just a clown, but that really does seem fundamental. If he takes your money, he should at least tell you where it's gone. And then the following day we saw even more houses being given away free of charge. This time it's 40 houses and they're worth 272 grand each. That's over £250,000 spent on migrant homes. And although they don't actually get to keep the house forever, getting these migrants out is going to be almost impossible, because it could be months or it could be years. But let's face it, it's probably going to be decades. But it's not actually all bad news. Because in a slight sign of resistance, we saw 20-mile-an-hour signs being damaged and brought down. It was actually over 150 total so far. And it's similar to the Blade Runners in London, but this time they're doing it with Welsh street signs. Because what you gotta remember is that the public voted for none of this. So I wouldn't be surprised when they start kicking off. And as if the government hasn't given enough migrants homes already, we saw how migrants have been placed in an old abandoned shopping centre. And it's actually being renovated completely free of charge by the government. Complete brand new apartments just going to half the planet. Honestly, this is UK-wide right now. And it just keeps costing more and more money. And as if you thought they couldn't waste any more cash, I've got some bad news. Because town halls and councils in the UK have spent almost £52 million on diversity roles. These are essentially the equality jobs that you see on channels like this one. But unfortunately for the taxpayers, the bill is starting to add up. And look, I'm all for things like wheelchair access. You know, anything that you can do to make it easier for those guys. But that's not the inclusion that they're going on about here. This is just pure cringe. And then we took a trip to London where it turns out that Sadiq Khan was very upset. Because it came out in the news that 450 ULEZ cameras have been destroyed. And Sadiq really wants you to think that it's just a minor issue. But when this many cameras are involved, I think Sadiq's problems are bigger than he knows. And because all of this was getting a bit too much, we decided to head home. But there was a problem. Because they'd replaced our house with a mud hut. Because a company has decided to introduce them to the UK. And no joke, they actually say that mud huts could revolutionise the way that modern houses are built. And look, I know that we used to do that a few hundred years ago. And just like thatch roofing, some of those traditions do still hold up. But I don't think this is going to revolutionise UK home building. Maybe a few hundred years ago, but not anymore. So we decided to abandon our mud hut, and we did the traditional thing of finding the nearest watering hole. And that location just so happened to be Leeds. But unfortunately, on the way, we noticed 13,000 potholes. And this is one city in the UK, but they've just got 13,000 potholes. And to be fair, someone pointed out in that video that things like potholes and ULEZ and 20-mile-an-hour zones, they are actually having the effect of stopping you from driving. I'm sure some are deliberate and I'd like to think that some aren't, but they are still having the effect of stopping you from driving. But I just think 13,000 potholes is way too many. Because I know what you're thinking. Clown. Leeds is a major city, so why doesn't it focus on fixing its roads? Well, it's because the council would rather spend the money on things like this. It was done as part of a Leeds art festival, and it cost 477 grand. And well, it's just wood bolted to the floor. Like honestly, it just makes no sense. It doesn't even have a roof. And it was only temporary, so it's already gone. But they still managed to spend almost £500,000 on it. It's just pointless. But because the council love to waste money and they also love to get in your way, we saw how Hertfordshire Council has decided to go full speed with its 20-mile-an-hour zones. And believe it or not, right, the public actually held a petition against it. But unfortunately, that's just a petition, and you know the council doesn't really care about the public's opinion. Because they want to take your money and they also want to tell you what to do. And when it comes to the both of those, they're definitely not budging. But then we saw something that we haven't seen before. We saw £1.50 chocolate bars in GPS containers. Like £1.50 chocolate bars. And you gotta take them to the till and ask the cashier to unlock it for you. Plus you gotta carry around half a shoebox in your basket all the time. But not only that, in the same article we actually saw something even worse. Because you got these two here. These are display bottles of fabric conditioner and ketchup. You can see one's empty and one's half empty. And it's the same deal. You got to take it to your nearest employee, and he'll actually give you the full one that's stored behind the counter. And what I will say, right, like I said, people will always tell you that it's just one thing. But I've actually got a folder of 72 photos of security tagged items. Like, that's where we are now. Some of them are like the fabric softener, and some of them are going on cheese. But they say that it's just one thing. But why have I got a folder of 72 things? Like, again, before we move on to the next thing, it just makes no sense. And then we saw a story that the government really should have been able to avoid. Because it turns out that all of these migrant camps in the UK, places like RAF Scampton and the Bibby Stockholm as well, it actually turns out that they're going to cost more than hotel rooms. And I really don't understand how the government didn't know this beforehand. Because either they didn't bother to forecast, or they did forecast and they actually got it completely wrong. But it doesn't matter because we've still got half the planet due to arrive. And just like the migrants once they get into the UK, our next move was to head straight to London, where it turns out that Sadiq Khan had met another ULEZ roadblock. But this one's pretty decent, because people have actually been able to stick bat boxes up the ULEZ poles. They're like £9.99, and they're just putting them right next to the camera. It means that there's a potential that Sadiq Khan and his ULEZ guys won't be able to put a ladder up and fix the camera. I mean, it's a long shot and it is a funny one as well. And it will be very interesting to see if this works. And at £9.99, it's actually cheaper than a ULEZ day pass. And then we saw Cadbury make a very strange move, because they turned Easter eggs into gesture eggs. And it was just in a local area in the UK, the East Midlands to be precise. But you know what the East Midlands is like, it actually looks more like the Middle East. So they changed it from Easter eggs to gesture eggs, just to appease the not-so-British population. Because it's always been Easter to you, and to be fair, it's been Easter to Cadbury for over 100 years. But when it comes to the modern day, I guess they're just gesture eggs now. And as if we didn't have enough people to please, we saw a record number of illegal migrants enter the UK. And smart people like yourself will be able to remember Rishi Sunak's 5-point plan. Because he told you very specifically as well, he told you that he was going to stop the boats. But it turns out that the complete opposite has happened, and we actually have more than ever. And you know what this means. Because record arrivals also means record payouts. The total number's going to go up as well as the total bill. And speaking of record payouts, the government are earning more than ever before through inheritance tax. I really do think that this is the worst tax of them all. And it's gone up by almost £500 million. And like I said, I really don't like this tax. Because they'll take your money when you're alive. And they'll also take it when you're not. Honestly, like I said, this is the worst of them all. But because they spend half their day trying to tax you, the government actually forgot to do some of the basics. Because somehow we've got millions of potholes in the UK. I mean, I know they do get round to fixing one or two by you. But honestly, with thousands popping up left, right and centre, I really think it's just going to get to the point where we're all just going to need 4x4s. To be fair, actually, that's probably just going to make the road even worse. And just like all of these potholes, all of these stories have started to add up. Because people will tell you, like I always say, people will tell you that it's just one thing. But all of these stories happened within a 1-month span. And I do really think that when you see them all laid out on the table like this, it really does help grow your perspective. Because if it was just one isolated case, I mean, I could kind of get it. But when I'm working full time with 2 kids to look after and I can pull all of these out of the woodwork, honestly, I really don't have much optimism these days. And if you enjoyed today's video, something that I haven't mentioned yet, is in a couple of months' time, I'm actually planning on doing this full time. So I'm going to have about an extra 8 hours a day completely free, which is going to open up a whole world of possibilities for the channel. So if you did want to see that and you wanted to see more degeneracy, then feel free to subscribe, where you can join the 29,906 of us. And thank you to the channel members, and thank you for checking out this video on screen.
This country has gone crazy.